Hi, it's Dwyer. It's October 8th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. Also, Money1776.com, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online, right? Nothing I say in this video should be construed as investment advice. I want everyone watching this video to do their own due diligence and to think for themselves. If I mention a stock, your underlying assumption should be that I either own it or am thinking about buying it, right? Trust no one, including me. Now, folks, we're in an era of absurdity in my eyes, right? I'm sure many people look back to the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, right? They look back to Jim Crow and that era, and they wonder, how could society have believed what they believed back then? I can tell you, when I was a little kid, there would be smoking sections in restaurants, and you'd be in the non-smoking section, and the smoke would just billow in, and you thought to yourself, wow, you know are they really protecting me from getting cancer? Right? I'm not kidding. you know so let's just say, these days, Big Brother is still making mistakes. We're supposed to believe here in the United States that tariffs, I can't even say this without laughing, tariffs are supposed to be good for you. That these evil foreign countries have been abusing you with low priced products. Right? The argument doesn't even make sense. We're supposed to hear that China is our enemy. Somehow China is undermining us. But understand, under the status quo that existed before this current tariff regime, where, of course, one person, the President of the United States, in a country with 50 states, with 50 state legislatures, is making decisions for everyone, right? And it's just, has just decided that the idea of countries giving you lower priced products and slapping tariffs on their own citizens to have their citizens pay more for high quality American products being sold in China and places like that, that's somehow bad. While at the same time, right, claiming that we have to be punitive toward countries like China. Right, folks, it doesn't make sense. If the Chinese are paying more for American products under the prior status quo, and if we're paying less, then, if I'm to believe you, why isn't that a good thing? Why is it better that I get hit with a tariff, right, that I have to pay, no one else? I'm the one paying the tariff. Why does the American consumer have to pay more? Why is it a good thing if the Chinese consumer is now paying less under some tariff deal? Right? Isn't that, in essence, a wealth transfer from the American consumer to American exporters? Right? The exporters aren't sharing their profits with me, the American consumer who doesn't own shares of their stock, as repeat players in international trade. Isn't that one of the risks of doing business? You're an American exporter, you understand that you're in a market where internationally different countries are going to have the right to levy tariffs on the products you export to that country. Right? Also, the amount of the tariff that the Chinese government decides to put on American imports, isn't that an issue for the Chinese voter and their government? How am I involved, and why do I have to pay higher prices for the importation of Chinese goods due to a tariff tax levied by my own government on me? Right? So, folks, I need for people to understand that the narratives we're hearing don't make sense. A lot of cost is being put on the American consumer by our own government, which is claiming that they're saving us money. Unemployment is creeping up. People can't afford homes. In fact, the value of homes in many areas is dropping. You're being pinched already. Have you looked at your electric bill? Has the price gone up now that you're competing with AI providers for electricity? You're being pinched, and you're hearing that higher prices, tariffs, are good for you. Folks, that's the era we live in right now. The doublespeak is simply stunning. Right? You can't believe what you're being told. You need to think for yourself. So let's talk about some issues. Understand, I'm not expecting anyone to agree with me. I'm just giving a point of view. A lot of what I say is not going to be politically correct. Not that I'm going to spend any of my time, at least I hope I'm not, trying to be politically correct. Right? Let's just work on being correct, not politically correct. So, Diddy. The jury came back. We heard that this guy was some major criminal, and it was a little bit shocking because we didn't hear that about Hugh Hefner. Right? You got the feeling that libertine lifestyles in a free country were actually allowed. Right? But it's Diddy. Wow, he's coming up from rap music. Somehow this is the guy we're going to make an example of. Right? Not, the guy in the Playboy Mansion. Nothing like that. Right? No, we're going to make an example of this guy. So they brought charges against him. The charges included racketeering, sex trafficking. You thought to yourself, wow, this guy must be having parties at a Playboy Mansion, must be inviting celebrities, must be importing women from third world countries, depressed economically countries who didn't want to be there, right? Must be forcing people into prostitution, right? You think you're going to be a maid for Diddy Enterprises, and suddenly you're, part of some sexual activity, you're being sex trafficked. That's the way the indictment looked to me. Right? Google the indictment. Folks, it's as ridiculous as hearing that tariffs are good for you. Well, they had a trier of fact. We have a jury system. Isn't that sacred in America? The jury heard the evidence, and the jury found that there was no coercion. Right? No coercion. Apparently, things were consensual. Apparently, the consenting adults who were involved in Diddy's orgies were allowed to consent to being part of an orgy. Right? The government really had no role in their decision making. The government couldn't hop out the weeds and say, hey, even though you're old enough to vote, you're not old enough to consent to what you do with your own body. Right, folks? America's free. We understand the government has no role. If you're at an orgy and suddenly some tax collector hops out of the weeds and says, hey, we're going to start arresting people because you can't participate in this, right? People can turn to that person and say, get out of my face. This is a government overreach. I'm an adult. You can't tell me who to have sex with or when to have sex. Right? So apparently, if we're to believe this jury, in a free country, you can consent to be part of an orgy. Let me also say, too, there's a dog and pony show component here. The jury said there's no coercion. Now, if all you're dealing with are consenting adults, people who are voting age or higher, then there should be no victims. Right? If everyone consented to be there, if everyone consented to participate, if there is, as the jury found, no coercion, then folks, there can be no victims. Right? So I'm a bit puzzled. You have attorneys, and Lord knows, there are attorneys out there who will claim credit for anything, right? You have attorneys saying, oh, gee, we're happy with the sentencing. My client was concerned that Diddy might get off scot-free. Right? My client was a victim. A victim of what? Her own consent? Now that the jury has rendered its verdict, we can say there was no coercion according to the jury. If there was no coercion, attorney, what is your press conference about? How was your client a victim in a case in which the jury found that there was no coercion? Well, understand how preposterous the sentencing was. And that's what it was, preposterous. The judge kept mentioning coercion. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I thought the jury was the finder of fact here. Right? I don't understand. Why are you contradicting the jury? Didn't the prosecution have its opportunity to prove racketeering? Right? Wasn't RICO a part of this case? Sex trafficking. If the prosecution did not meet that burden, if the jury found that there was no coercion, when you're talking about coercion at the sentencing, what are you talking about? Now, folks, let's take a step back. Keep in mind, I'm not here saying everyone should be involved in orgies. What I am here defending is the freedom of people to be involved in orgies. Let's think about the mechanics of it. You understand that not everyone is into orgies. Many people look down on orgies. It's a free country, at least let's hope it is. People have a right to their opinion. So, Diddy. Imagine Diddy's neighbors, imagine Diddy's business dealings, imagine Diddy's business identity, right? So, rather than ask his friends, neighbors, or business associates if they wanted to have sex with him and his girlfriend, Diddy hired prostitutes from escort services. Right? Now, folks, have we reached a point in the United States where being a John gets you 50 months? Can we ask that question? Hasn't prostitution been around for centuries? Right? Isn't there references to prostitutes in the Bible? Since when has being a John gotten customers of prostitutes 50 months? Folks, it's preposterous. Right? Let me also say this too. You're in New York City, what they call the tri-state area. Right? You hire someone from an escort service. You know the way phones are these days. Area codes don't really represent anymore where the person's from. So you hire a prostitute and oh my goodness, she is actually someone based in New Jersey. Right, folks? Is that what we intend to punish in statutes that talk about interstate prostitution? Right? So if she were from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island, you're good. But if she actually has to travel into New York City from New Jersey, right? Let's say she lives in Elizabeth, New Jersey, or Newark, New Jersey, right? If she actually has to travel through the tunnel to get into Manhattan, where you are, you're looking at interstate prostitution charges. Right, folks, in this day and age where, I have phone lines, a 415, a 650, a 408. In this day and age where many people have phone lines in different area codes, I believe we need to re-examine these laws, especially if being a John is supposed to expose you to 50 months. 50 months in prison. Let's talk about other issues. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? I was in a store with my daughter. This was months ago. I think I mentioned this in an earlier video. And understand, stores want you, it was a fast food place. It was a sandwich place. Sandwich places want you to be in the store, especially if you have young, impressionable kids, right? Because the high margin items are in the store. The high margin items include things like soda, right? In the store, they can say, hey, that large soda is $3, right? Even though it costs them, let's say, 10 cents. Right? Chips. In the store, they can say, hey, for this bag of chips, it's $1.29. Even though you can go on Amazon and you can buy, chips, much bigger bags of chips for less per ounce. Right? In the store, they have the sides there. Your kid, is looking over your shoulder and sees the French fries being made. If the store is clever, they have the pastries up front. Right? I'm sure many people have been in Starbucks and you're there ordering a coffee, and then you look over, you see some food in the rack, and you're like, oh man, that egg sandwich looks appetizing. While I came in here just for the coffee, let me go get the egg sandwich too. right? So these stores profit from having you in the store. Here's the problem, right? It was time for us to check out. And of course, I'm looking at the machine. I'm paying with a card. Maybe I should have had cash with me. I'm paying with a credit card, and the machine has boxes for tip: 18%, 20%, 22%. Old timers like me are thinking to themselves, what happened to 15%? Right? It's a sandwich place. I have to pay before I get the sandwich. The sandwich maker has some discretion on just how much meat am I going to get. Right? How much, cheese are they going to put on my sandwich? I don't want to be the person who doesn't tip, who doesn't pay the 18% extra. Right? God forbid the person who customizes it and pays 5% and looks like a cheapskate. I don't want to be that person. There's social pressure. Right? It's even more profound than that. There's parental pressure. You have your daughter there, even if you're getting crappy service, and you're thinking about not giving a tip because you don't like the attitude of the person behind the counter. Now, a few years ago, hey, that was acceptable. Right? You had to earn a tip. But you don't want to cause a ruckus in front of your child. Now, here's the problem. I know people are going to say, hey, these workers don't get paid enough. Right? The tip is to allow the worker to have a living wage. You're thinking to yourself, isn't that something they should have worked out beforehand with their employer, with whoever's running the sandwich place? Right? Why are they putting me in a situation where I'm supposed to pay above and beyond the advertised price? But here's the problem for these stores. Here's why this machine might actually be a money loser. You have major competition now. DoorDash, Uber One. Right? Understand, if I order the sandwiches at home, I get the sandwich. My daughter gets her sandwich. We have soda in the fridge that's a lot cheaper than the soda they're selling at the sandwich place. I'm not going to order a soda if I'm ordering from home. We have chips at home a lot cheaper than they do in the sandwich place. Right? My daughter can't fall in love with some dessert in the display rack on the fly at the sandwich place if we're not at the sandwich place. So, using DoorDash, Uber One, unless I'm paying 18-20% for the delivery service, I'm actually saving money by ordering at home. The foot traffic at the sandwich place would be depressed. The sandwich place might net less because they aren't able to make the sale on the higher margin soda, the higher margin chips, the higher margin dessert. So I would argue this machine is actually costing these restaurants money. The restaurants would be better off paying their workers more and not putting consumers in a position where there are boxes, predetermined boxes, starting at 18% on machines that the person paying with the card has to deal with. Let's talk a little bit more about economics. Now, Amazon Grocery has evolved. I'm mentioning Amazon Grocery. There are other great delivery services, right? I also am a Walmart home delivery customer, right? Just understand that with the economies of scale that Amazon Grocery has, their markup is lower than the markup at my local supermarket, right? I want my local supermarket to make a profit, but my local supermarket's not dealing in the robotized warehouse type of volume that Amazon grocery can deal in. So, if you, like me, like slices of sharp cheddar cheese, just understand, at my local supermarket, which will go nameless, right? God bless them, it's a great store. But they're charging about 2 times what Amazon is charging for the same slices of sharp cheddar, right? Amazon, of course, has their own brand of sharp cheddar, but understand, I'm saving over $1.50 for each sliced cheddar package that I get from Amazon, right? So what I found, right, things like almond milk, I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but things like almond milk, understand, I'm saving $1.50 for every almond milk that I buy. So if you do the math, you'll find out that not only is Amazon delivering these products to your doorstep, but you're actually charged overall, including the delivery fee. I know they call it a tip. They add $5 to what, they're charging. But all things considered, I get stuff delivered for less than it would cost me to drive to the grocery store, to pick the stuff off the shelves, to stand in line, to make the payment, and to bring the stuff back home. So folks, I don't see any way that traditional grocery stores are going to be able to survive long term, right? It's just a matter of how long is the transition going to be. Now, I'll agree. I have friends who want to feel the fruit that they're buying, who want to see the food that they're buying. Got news for you. Sprouts delivers. Whole Foods delivers. This new generation, they don't need to squeeze the fruit. They're interested in price and convenience. They don't want to spend the time driving to the Whole Foods, right? And of course, Whole Foods is part of the Amazon interface online. Let's talk about other good intentions. 1979. Ironically, just shortly before the 3 Mile Island debacle, you had a movie with some great actors. Jane Fonda, Jack Lemmon, Michael Douglas. The movie was called The China Syndrome. And it talked about the risks involved with nuclear plants. Right back then, we were terrified. Right? We were terrified. The idea was that these nuclear plants have radiation. Wasn't every nuclear plant possibly an atomic bomb? Right? What if radiation leaked out and killed a bunch of people? Weren't these companies in the nuclear just looking for profits? Weren't they placing all of us at risk? So understand what happened. Nuclear plants became unpopular. Politicians were seeking popularity. The demand for energy wasn't something addressed, right? We stopped building nuclear plants in large part. We didn't keep up with China, which continued building them. So now, what I want people to realize is that you have a scarcity of electricity, and you're competing with deep-pocketed AI companies. right? You're using Google Gemini, which is a great platform. I use it, right? You're using, Grok, and you think that all of this stuff is free for you. You wonder, wow, how the hell are these companies, Anthropic, making money from these free offerings? Folks, you're paying for part of each offering because you're paying the higher electrical costs that come with decades of our government ignoring the need to build nuclear plants, and with AI being energy intensive. So let me just tell you, as part of my work, I host Zoom webinars, right? Just meetings. I serve as a judge pro tem for mandatory settlement conferences and settlement officers conferences, right? So they'll get hot. You have a couple getting divorced. They've spent years of their lives with each other. They had dreams when they got married, right? Sometimes the cases involve infidelity, right? You can imagine people are talking over each other, right? The husband saying, look, I've been the one paying the mortgage. The wife then says, no, not so fast. You remember those months when I paid the mortgage? You remember the money I used for the remodeling of the house? Then the two of them are yelling, and sometimes I'm saying next to nothing, right? I'm just there listening to the two of them, and sometimes they bring attorneys with them to these settlement conferences. So then the attorney needs to look tough because the attorney's getting paid for a reason, right? Their clients can't do all the talking, so they start yelling. So I recently decided, first time, I recently decided that I was going to get an AI summary of, a settlement conference because I have to write a report afterwards, right? So they had a box there. I had seen it. I thought there's no way this is going to work with people talking over each other, people yelling, things getting emotional at some of these, not all of them, right? So you know the rest. I clicked the box, and I had a couple, and they were yelling, and it got hot and bothered. I had to cut off some people. There were attempted filibusters and stuff like that. So after the conference, I had forgotten I checked the box for an AI summary of the event. So, it said, hey, do you want your AI summary now? And I said, yeah, sure, why not, right? I expected to see something that had a lot of, incomprehensible references and stuff like that. To my amazement, the summary was crystal clear. It was well written, right? It was certainly worth clicking on, do you want an AI summary? It was stunningly good. Now, I've only seen one of these summaries, right? Who knows if it's going to continue to be stunningly good? But my point to people is that AI is here, it's real, it's a time saver. It's such a time saver that I'm someone who, likes to dress like this, right? I'll throw on a Patagonia shirt or a Columbia shirt, and I'm good. I don't want to put on a shirt and tie. I prefer phone calls to doing video, believe it or not, right? I like doing video, so I'm on YouTube, but in my business life, I actually prefer phone calls, right? I tried doing Zoom meetings with just a picture of myself. People didn't like that, right? So let me just say, I'm even thinking now of, instead of doing phone calls, converting over to a lot of Zoom meetings, because I would no longer have to write out the summary. The AI is that good. So I just need for people to understand that AI is so good, we're going to be paying more for our electrical costs for some time because it takes time to build these nuclear plants. Let me throw out a name here. It's a stock. The symbol is NNE. Again, the stock symbol is NNE. You need to look at these nuclear stocks. You now have modular nuclear plants. The energy shortage is acute in the AI space, right? Given the value of AI, and I'm not saying every AI company is going to make it, but let's just say AI is with me for the rest of my life. Some companies are definitely going to make it, right? Just understand that that leads to challenges because of well-intended decisions in the past not to pursue nuclear energy. Now we have no choice, right? The energy needs are here. Modern technology, helpful modern technology, requires them. You want to look at who's building nuclear plants, where the technology is today, right? Many of these companies are publicly traded. Take a look at NNE. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. I hope you leave them in the comments section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.